giving a presentation on the journey of Greek theatre. In this presentation we'll be learning about how Greek theatre was first created, where it came from, and how it links to the play I did called Antigone. But before we can start learning about Greek theatre, we first must learn about this guy, Dionysus. Dionysus was the god of fertility and wine. He was later considered a patron of the arts. Dionysus was the son of Zeus, who was the king of the gods, and a merely mortal called Semele. He was actually the first ever god to have a mother who was just a human. The festival of Dionysus, which is named in Dionysus's name, was held in spring when vines would start bearing leaves. It became one of the most important events of the year and primarily focused on theatre. Most great Greek plays were initially written to be performed at the Feast of Dionysus. All participants were writers, actors, spectators, and they were regarded as sacred servants of Dionysus during the festival. And here we have a picture of Dionysus himself. His face and actual physique and body changes throughout the year, and in some religions such as Roman, he is more skinnier, and his name becomes Bacchus instead of Dionysus. Next is the Festival of Dionysus. The Festival of Dionysus was known as Dionysia. It was built by the Athenian ruler Pisistratus, and it was built in the honour of Dionysus. It was a large festival in ancient Athens which was celebrated in the honour of Dionysus. The Dionysia was considered to have two related festivals, the rural Dionysia and the city Dionysia. That's it there. The Dionysia was a large festival in ancient Athens in honour of the god Dionysius. The central events were theatrical performances and dramatic tragedies, and then from 487 BC, comedies were then introduced. It was the second most important festival in Greek. The Dionysia was actually consisted of two related festivals, as previously mentioned: the rural Dionysia and the city Dionysia, which took part in two different parts of the year. They were also essential of the parts of the Dionysia mysteries. The rural Dionysia was originally the rural festival. It celebrated the cultivation of vines, and it was probably a very ancient festival, perhaps not originally associated with with Dionysus. It was held during the winter in the month of Poseidon, the month strangling the winter solids, i.e. this would be to December throughout to January. Next is it would involve singing, performances, acting, and music would be played such as on flutes and on drums, and there would be many dances. Seeing as how this was one of the ancient festivals that may not have been considered to be celebrated Dionysus, many people got drunk at this party. They would drink wine, which represented fertility, and as they drank it, they would become drunk because they felt like as they were drinking, becoming drunker and drunker, they were having some sort of ecstasy, that becoming closer to the gods. And then through this, many intercourses would go through. Many people would have sex at these festivals. This was due to the fact that Dionysus was actually the god of fertility, as previously mentioned. So that just doesn't involve plants, it actually involves baby making. The city of Dionysia was also known as the Great Dionysia. It was the urban part of the festival, possibly established during the tyranny of Pisistratus in the 6th century BC. The festival was held from the 9th and the 13th of the month, the lunar month straddling the vernal. This was incorporated with it through March through to April in the solar calendar. It was 3 months after the rural Dionysia, probably to celebrate the end of winter and the harvesting of the year's crops. According to tradition, the festival was established after Eleutheræ, a town on the border between Attica and Boeotia, had chosen to become part of Attica. At this festival, they did it as the same as the rural festival, but it was more tamed. People would still drink and people would still party, they would still perform, they would still act, they would still sing, they would still dance, but many of the intercourse and the drinking was kept to a minimum. So the having sex part would not actually happen at the festival, where at the festival it would take place after the festival at their homes. They would still get drunk, but they wouldn't get as drunk as they usually would. Again, talking about the festival in a whole, people who followed Dionysus would drink the blood and eat the flesh of a sacrificed bull or goat, and that's where the festival of Dionysus or Dionysia gets its name, because it means goat flesh. They did this so they would achieve identification with a Dionysus. So Dionysus would notice them, that he would commend them for celebrating and praying to him. Many say this is a similar ritual to the sacrament of the Christian Mass. Okay, and then early rituals took place in the springtime due to the fact that it was known as the time of rebirth. The court of Dionysus would tell myths and stories about their gods and heroes by singing, dancing, playing instruments. They would also do this in a chorus, which is a collective of people that act as one person. Next, here's a few examples of what the festival of Dionysus may have looked like. But next, we have the space of Greek theatre. In Greek theatre, we have many things that create the actual theatre. The first of them being the theatron. The theatron in general was where the audience of Greek tragedy of any performance would sit and watch the performance. So really, it's basically just the audience. Next, we have the orchestra. The orchestra was a circle space in front of the stage. It was mostly where the chorus would stay. It was a large circular or rectangular in some cases area at the centre part of the theatre where the play, dance or religious rites or acting was used to take place. So really it was one of the main things what people would watch. Next we have the famille. The famille is a small altar that what was for Dionysus, which people would pray to in the middle of the orchestra. Next we have the proscenium. A proscenium is a metaphorical verbal plane of space in the theatre surrounded on the top of the sides by a physical proscenium arch. This necessarily wasn't an actual arch, but it was just easier to call it an arch instead. The actual proscenium actually was a kind of sense of coming through to the fourth wall. This is what the chorus mostly did, because they would explain the decisions of characters and why the characters did this, or why they did this for, or maybe they were just trying to explain what was going on in the actual place if people didn't understand. So it kind of broke that fourth wall, and that's what the proscenium was used for. Next we have the skene. The skene is in ancient Greek theatre is a building behind the actual playing area that was originally a hut for the changing of masks or costumes. But it eventually became the background before which the drama was enacted. It was first used in 465 BC. The skene was originally a small wooden structure facing the circle of spectators. But it was basically known as the hut or tent before it gradually evolved into what it is now. And lastly, we have the pardos. The pardos was actually the passage into the ancient Greek theatres between the ophidrium and the skene. By the spectators had access to the theatre, and the actors might come on during the play to actually get on to the orchestra or to the skene. When talking about Greek theatre, one of the most many things that are important are the inventions in Greek theatre. The main three are the mechane. The mechane, or the machine, was a crane used in Greek theatre. It was especially used in the 5th and 4th centuries of the BC. It was made by wooden beams and pulley systems. The device was used to lift an actor up into the air. It was usually used to represent flight. This stage machine was particularly used to bring gods onto the stage. So people who was representing the gods, not playing the gods, because if they were playing the gods, that was known as disrespecting them, so they only represented gods. But as they were representing gods, they would be lifted up into the air to show that they were high authority, that they were a god. It was all, the machine was basically known as God out of the machine. Next, we have the Aquilia. It's basically known as the rollout machine. It was a wheeled platform that was used to carry off dead bodies off the stage. So characters that had died on stage would be rolled off on this machine so that they didn't lose the imagination, so that people actually thought they were still dead. It tended to use a revolve system where people would push it and crank it down to move it. An example of this was used in Antigone, which was the play we studied, where the corpse of Eurydice was draped over the household altar in Sophocles' play. Sadly, we did not see Eurydice's death on stage, but we knew that the rollout machine would be used to pull her off. And next, we have the Penates. The Penates were basically pictures hung on the top or at the back of where the skinny would be, with pictures. They were basically pictures to make the atmosphere and to make the actual scene more realistic. Next is the way it was built. Greek theatre buildings were called theatrons. It was theatron basically means seeing place. The theatres were large and open-air structures constructed on the slopes of hills. They consisted of three principal elements: the orchestra, the skinny, and the audience. A typical theatre was enormous, able to hold around 15,000 viewers. In Greek theatres, they were not enclosed. The audience could see each other and the surrounding countryside, as well as the actors and the chorus. Here's an example of the actual theatre. So here you see that the theatron is right over here, and the core is where the orchestra would be, and the skinny is right behind the orchestra. Okay, behind the actual orchestra was a large rectangular building. As mentioned, it was called the skinny. It was typically were 2 or 3 doors in the skinny that led onto the orchestra, and from which actors could enter and exit. Later the skinny became a permanent stone structure. The structures were sometimes painted to serve as backdrops, hence the English word scenery. In front of the skinny, there may have been raised acted areas called the proscenium, the ancestor of the modern proscenium stage. It was possible that the actors are opposed to the chorus and they acted entirely on the proscenium, but this was not certain. The rising circle of the orchestra was the audience. The audience sat there off the benches built up on the sides of the hill, and Greek theatres then could only be built on hills because they were the correct shape for the actual theatre. The reason why they would build them on hills was that so they could get closer to the gods. So when they would be performing to the sky. So the closer they are to the gods, the more they felt like the more privileged they were and the more pleased they would be because the gods could hear them performing. Next up, we have the actors. A cast of a Greek play in Dionysia were comprised of amateurs. They were not professionals. Sadly though, all the actors were all males. Women were never allowed to act. The women were, back then, in those times, women were seen as people who could only cook, clean, stay at home and raise the children, and acting, surprisingly, was only known as a man's job. An actor had to be able to sing and dance. It may not have to been professionally, because they took about 6 to 9 months to prepare for an actual performance, so amateurs would be taught the basics and what they need to learn. Ancient Greek actors actually had to gesture grandly, had to use hand gestures and body movements to make them very large, so the entire audience could actually see them. However, most Greek theatres were cleverly constructed, so that they would transmit even the smallest sound at any seat, so you could hear any sound coming around. The actors were so far away that the audience, that's without the aid of exaggerated costumes and masks, no one could actually pay attention. And so in the chorus and an actual performer, they would use masks and very vibrant costumes, very colourful, so that they could grasp the audience attention. The reason why, and then many important figures, like in the play Creon, would wear very bright colours, maybe like a bright purple, to show that he was authority, and that he had authority, and that he was the king, and that the audience should pay attention to him. When it came to the masks, the actual masks were made out of linen and cork, so none have actually survived. They would have been burnt down when the war came out. When the war probably would have been privileged from like Vikings or Saxons or Romans. Tragic masks carried mournful and pained expressions, whilst comedic masks were smiling and leering. The shape of the mask amplified the actor's voice, hence why they actually had to wear them in the actual performance. And as I said, with the acoustics of the actual mask plus the actual theatre shape, it actually was presented very loudly, so people could actually hear them. It amplified the actor's voice, which made words easy for the audience to hear, as mentioned. All actors and members of the chorus had to wear masks due to the Bacchic tradition. The number of actors were about 12 to 15 people. Many of these masks were used to portray heroes and gods. However, the Greeks had to be careful not to insult the gods and only to represent them, because it was seen as a great sin to play a god. You had to represent. You had to show. The mask was used to show the people that you were not a god. That you are just portraying a god. If you came out and flat and said that I am the god Zeus or Hades, it would be a great sin, and you would mostly be stoned to death. Next up, we have some masks. Here are some actual examples of masks. Here we see the Greek gestures of the masks being happiness and sadness. The second mask is Zeus. Zeus was the god of all gods, and he was also the god of the sky and lightning. And next to him is one of the big three, Zeus's brother, Hades. Hades was the god of the underworld and death. These were some of the main masks that would have been used in an actual performance. These two to represent gods, and these two to represent the emotion. That, as you can tell by the picture, they're very amplified, sort of to show gestures and to make sure that the audience actually knew what was going on. Next is the chorus. A chorus was a collective of 12 to 15 male actors who comment with a collective voice on a dramatic action. They would variously sing, dance and speak lines in unison, whilst wearing masks to represent a character. Plays of ancient Greek theatre always included a chorus that offered a variety of background and summary information, just to help the audience understand what was going on in the performance. However, some people actually believed that the chorus was just seen as one individual and not multiple people. The chorus represents on stage the general population of the particular story, in the sharp contrast with many of the themes of the ancient Greek plays, which tended to be about the individual heroes, gods, goddesses. They were often the same. The people who played in the chorus were often the same sex as the main character, which made sense due to the fact that women were allowed to, be in plays. So men would have to actually play women. But it was seen as okay because they were wearing a mask, so you really couldn't tell the gender unless they had a very big physique, and you could tell through that. Originally, a chorus of people stood together. However, Greek theatre carried on through Greek theatre carried on through the years. As Greek theatre carried on throughout the years, the chorus started to disperse around the whole of the stage. However, they would still speak in unison, but they made their lines more louder than creating a darker and more urgent tone. So on the actual stage, the chorus, instead of staying on the orchestra of the orchestra of the theatre. They would move out, so maybe they would go on the skinny, or they would go near the pardos, and they would stand there and they would speak to the audience, but they would have to be loud and clear because they were separate. The closer they were together, the louder it was, and the more in unison it was. So it took a lot of training and dedication to become that professional. And here is a picture of what a chorus would have looked like. As you can see, they're very close together, and the chorus all wear a similar mask. As you can see here, that would have been the chorus leader. The chorus leader was a person who would lead the actual chorus, basically telling them when the cues were, when they had to speak, how they should stand. Next, we have tragedy in Greek theatre. Greek tragedy was the earliest form of Western drama. The Thespis, who actually stood out of the chorus, is considered to be one of the first Greek actor and originator of tragedy. However, his importance is disputed, and Thespis is sometimes listed as a late 16th or choreographical order of Greek tragedy, people who did tragedies in plays. Greek tragedy means goat song. It perhaps referring to goats sacrificed to Dionysus before the performance of goat skins worn by the performers. So basically, they would, as I said before, they would sacrifice a goat, and that's how the tragedy got the name. Tragedies got the name of goat song, because it seems out here death, the sense of death with a goat was sad. That's hence where tragedy got the name. The actual tragedy actually had roots in rituals practiced by pre-civilized tribes. They would worship natural and seasonal forces such as the wind, the sky, fire and water. When watching these tragedies, everybody would get drunk off alcohol made from grapes, because they believed that the closer they were to Dionysus, they were more able to reach the plane of tranquility and God. Next is tragedy in Greek theatre even more, so maybe some more information. The basic structure of a Greek tragedy is categorised by the set of the conventions. The tragedy usually begins with the prologue, in which one or more characters introduce the drama and explain the background of the ensuing story. After the prologue, it is followed by the parados, after which the story unfolds through about 3 or more stories or episodes. The episodes were interpreted as stasima. It was choral interludes explaining and commenting on the situation developing in the play. The tragedy ends with the Exodus, a concluding story, and some plays did not adhere to the conventional structure. So the Exodus, maybe it wouldn't actually finish, it would be left on a cliffhanger. So it did not stay to the conventional structure. Before it was structured, most Dionysus cult members, such as Mad Ends, also known as Mad Women, would get drunk in spring and would listen to music and drums and flutes and pairs. Then pairs would also engage in intercourse, but sometimes they were more than 2 people. As you can see, Antigone relates to tragedy more than any genre, due to the fact that Antigone revolves around death, sadness and betrayal. So as you can see, there isn't really any humour in this play. It's more about a gripping sensation, making the audience think. Next, we have comedy in Greek theatre. Comedy was also important in ancient Greek theatre. Comedy plays were derived from the omission. There are no traces of its origin. So basically, it was basically improv. It was improvisation, and Aristophanes wrote most of the comedy plays. Out of these, 11 plays only survived due to probably ransacking, people destroying them, because they were only wrote on paper, so they would have been burnt really easily, or destroyed or decayed. Lystrata was one of them, and it was one of the most humorous tales about a strong woman who leads to a female coalition to end the war in Greece. The only thing that Antigone relates to something like comedy is the fact that with Lystracia, they both had a strong heroine. Sadly, though, I think it was more of a depressed story, and sadly she died in the end. But many of the plays were destroyed by raids or were worn away. Athenian comedy is conventionally divided into three periods: old comedy, middle comedy, and new comedy. Yet again, comedy was structured similarly to tragedy, and it involved the same traditions and rituals as the Greeks practiced. Then, last of the three, we have satire plays. Satire plays were was an ancient Greek form of tragic comedy. It was a mixture of tragedy and comedy. Similar into the spirit of bawdy satire or basque, the features of choruses and satires were based on Greek mythology and were rife with mock and drunkenness, brazen sexuality, pranks, sight gags, and general merriment. Satire plays were a mixture of comedy and tragedy, as personally said. So they would spend one moment. Mostly the start of the play would be introducing themselves, maybe a few gags, making the audience laugh, and then as they got into the middle, going towards the end, it would become more sad. So maybe they start with a few gags, later along the line someone might die, and it was just that's how they made the big shift into it. So maybe, I know for one of the examples was the way they shifted was, one of the performers played a prank on a girl and the girl passed away. So that was how they shifted it. Yeah, as I said. In Athenian Dionysia, which was the playwright competition, each playwright customarily entered 4 plays into the competition, 3 tragedies and 1 satire play, to be performed either at the end of the festival or between the second and third tragedies of trilogy. As a spirited entertainment, a comic relief to break the oppression of ours gloomy and fantastic tragedy. So basically, they would enter a competition and they would have to enter 3 tragedies and 1 satire play. Between those plays, there would be 1 comedic play to take the tension off the audience, to lighten up the audience. They were short and half the duration of a tragedy. The general theme was heaven, fate, and the gods affecting human affairs in the tragedies, was carried through into the festivals of the chorus of the satires and Selene, companions of Dionysus. And now for some more information on satire plays. The only satire play to survive was entirely on Euripides' Cyclops, based on Odysseus' encounter with the Cyclops, Polyphemus, which was the opposite. Was the Cyclops version of Dionysus. There's some trivia for you. Basically, Polyphemus was made to destroy Dionysus. So telling a story about a hero defeating Dionysus' enemy was seen to the gods as a great tribute. The number of persons in a chorus is not known in a satire play, although there were probably either 12 to 15, like in a tragedy. In accordance with popular notions about the satires, their costumes consisted of the skin of a goat, a deer, or a panther thrown over the naked body, and besides this as a hideous mask and bristling hair, the dance of the chorus was a satiric drama and called Cycnesis, and consisted of fantastic and kind of skipping and jumping like an antelope. Next is the plots of Antigone. Eteocles and Polynices were the brothers of Antigone and the sons of Oedipus. In this story, before the actual story of Antigone, Eteocles and Polynices got into a war. It was a civil war fighting over the throne. Sadly, they both killed each other in that story. They both died on the battlefield. So due to this, women were not able to come to the throne. So Antigone's uncle Creon, who was the brother of the previous queen, came onto the throne and became the new king of Thebes. After the battle, Eidocles was seen as a hero. He was given a proper burial with full honours. The reason why he was seen as a hero because he defended Thebes. Unlike his brother Polynices, who to Creon was seen as a traitor, and because he went away to fight with another city to earn the throne of Thebes. He was left to rot away on the top of a hill. The person who came up with this law was Antigone's uncle Creon. Antigone defies the law of her uncle to follow the law of the gods, because the law of the gods stated everyone shall be given a fair burial. But Creon's law stated that Polynices will not get a burial because he betrayed his city. Antigone goes on to bury her brother Polynices and is caught by soldiers and is taken to Creon. Creon locks her away in a prison, where she comes to the drastic conclusion to take her own life. Antigone was supposed to be wedded to Creon's son Haman, and as Haman found out about the news of his soon-to-be wife died, he then took his own life, and then he took his own life. Eurydice, Creon's wife, found out about Haman's suicide and took her own life as well. By finding out about this, Creon ultimately falls to depression and sadness as he realises that he shouldn't have defied the god's will, as he was told by the blind man that he should have stopped where he was and buried Polynices and set Antigone free, but it was too late. So as you can see, Antigone was a very tragic plight. Next, we have the characters of Antigone. First off, we have Antigone. And Antigone is the play's tragic heroine. In the first moments of the play, Antigone is opposed to her radiant sister, Ismene. Unlike her beautiful and docile sister, Antigone is solo, withdrawn, and recalcitrant. Antigone was brave. Antigone fought against the law of Creon because she believed that the gods were on her side, but sadly her demise came too soon. She was a very brave woman, and hence why she was the heroine of the story. Next we have Creon. Creon was Antigone's uncle. Creon is a powerful built but wary and wrinkled old man, suffering from the burdens of rule. He's a practical man, and he firmly distances himself from the tragic aspirations of Oedipus and his line. And he tells Antigone his only interest is the political and social order. Creon is bounded to the ideas of good sense, simplicity, and the banal of happiness and everyday life. He put aside the gods' ruling to create his own rules. He believed he was doing all these rules for his people, but he was actually a very manipulative man. He used the people's trust and became a dictator. Here's a picture of Antigone and a picture of Creon and what they may have looked like. Two more characters. Ismene. Ismene was the sister of Antigone and the daughter of Oedipus. She was blonde, full-figured, and radiantly beautiful. The laughing, talkative Ismene is the good girl of the family. She is reasonable and understands her place. She bowed down to Creon and decided to follow his rules just so that her family's name can live on. Antigone, she was against Antigone's act of rebellion, as in Sophocles' play allowed her. In Sophocles' play, she is Antigone's foil. Ultimately, she will recant and beg Antigone to allow her to join in her death. Though Antigone refuses, Ismene's conversion indicates how her resistance is contagious. Next is Haman. Haman was the son of Creon and the man who was supposed to be wed to Antigone. Haman appears twice in the play. In the first, he is rejected by Antigone. In the second, he begs his father to save Antigone's life. Creon refuses, ruins his exalted view of his father. Haman then decides to run away. He tells his father he's never going to ever see him again. He too refuses the happiness that Creon offers him and follows Antigone to a tragic demise, meaning they both die due to suicide. And here we have a family tree. First we have Laius, who was the first king of Thebes. He was married to Jocasta, but Laius was killed by Oedipus. There was an oracle told Laius that he was going to be killed by his own son. So his firstborn son was Oedipus, was left on a hill. Oedipus didn't know who his real parents were, so he killed Laius and married his own mother, who he didn't know. With his own mother, he had four children: Eidocles, who died, and Polynices, who died in a war with each other. Next was Ismene, who was one of the youngest daughters of the family, and Antigone, who was the protagonist of the story, but yet again died. Creon was the brother of Jocasta and became the new king of Thebes after Oedipus was exiled, and Eurydice was the wife of Creon. And then through these two we have Haman, who was engaged to Antigone and was supposed to be the future king of Thebes until him, Antigone and his mother died due to suicide. Next up we have the chorus in Antigone. The chorus appear as the narrators and commentators. The chorus frames the play with the prologue and epilogue, introducing the actors and characters under the sign of fatality. In presenting the tragedy, the chorus instructs the audience on a proper spectatorship, reappearing on the tragedy pivotal moments to comment on the action of the nature of the tragedy itself. Along with playing the narrator, the chorus also attempts to intercede throughout the play, whether on behalf of the Theban people or the horrified spectators. So the chorus spoke for the audience and the people of Thebes. They were necessarily important to the plays because they would comment on what was going on, why it happened, and maybe gave some clues to what would happen in the future. Next, we have the themes. The first theme is the rivalry between the sisters. In Antigone, the two sisters, Antigone and Ismene, are projected as foils and rivals. The main female character is Antigone, is thin, moody, stubborn, bold and manly. But the opposite to her is her sister Ismene, who is beautiful, reasonable, timid and obedient. When Antigone proposes the plan to bury her brother, her sister goes against it. She goes against it. Ismene goes against it because she does not want to ruin the bloodline of her family with Creon. Ismene cannot take a strong position. She fears that the man-made law that cannot give full support to moral duty of her sister Antigone. Her timid nature and feminine quality dominate her as she steps back from the idea. But as Antigone is bold and stubborn, she went through with the plan. She takes a stand in the sake of her family and the sake of her name, and she does not fear the man-made law and only fears the law of the gods. Because of this, the reason the two sisters now become rivals in the terms of beliefs, support and laws, ultimately ending in Antigone's loss. Pride. Next is pride. Pride is a characteristic of the characters in Sophocles' plays, due to which the main protagonists get punished from the gods without any mercy and have to face the deadly fall. In context of Antigone, Creon is given dangerous pride, which influences him to make a new law that substitutes the divine law of the gods. He is so blind in belief that the law he has made in the same divine law, but he has forgotten the fact that none can make a law equal to the gods, or greater to the gods. His punishment law that has made for Polynices is against God's law. He is reminded by the blind seer that the gods are with Antigone, but still he does not feel fear of the gods because his pride, that whatever he is doing is right. One sec. Because the pride he has to lose all his family members, he is ruined by the excess of pride.